Good afternoon. I apologize for the tardiness. We had some business going on earlier. I'm Senator Wayne Harper, co-chair of the committee with my good House Chair, Representative Kay Christopherson. We will go through, I don't have a quorum in, oh yeah, I do. Senator Kwan is here. I have a quorum in the Senate and a quorum in the House. I will go through and accept a motion to approve the minutes of September 18th. So moved by Representative Johnson. Discussion of that motion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll rule that passes unanimously. Now, we're going to move the agenda just a little bit because some of our people should have taken the train here rather than a slow airplane. So, you know, when they get here, we'll get them back on track.
They got sidetracked.
Yeah, no more sidetracking. We will go to item number 3 on the agenda, road rage. Representative Cutler. Welcome to the committee. Long time no see since you presented a bill. And you have Colonel Rapich with you. You introduce, and I want to go through, we had discussed road rage in June of 2023 in that meeting, and we'd asked for some follow-up on it, and frankly, everybody knows you can't control what somebody's going to do unless they're shackled or in a jail or something like that. But we want to go through and take a look at things that we can do to minimize road rage or you know, do education, whatever. So with that, we'll turn it over to you gentlemen for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we're going to turn over to the Colonel first to share some statistics that his office has observed.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Can you? Want me to? Yes, please. Thank you. So while she's pulling that up really quickly, and I can be really brief on this, we presented some statistics to kind of do our best at being able to scope the problem of road rage and put some data to the issue. The challenge we had with that is because there's not a consistent definition and it's not statutorily defined, and there's just gaps in being able to collect that data consistently. And so we gathered some data, and we've got some updates to that as that's coming up. Before we did that, in addition to being able to update the data sets we presented last session in June, we also took this issue to the LELC Road Safety Committee, subcommittee, which is made up of obviously myself and then several police chiefs and sheriffs and prosecutors within the state. And we took this and kind of scoped this out with them and talked through this issue and got more perspective from agencies that are dealing with this as well, and came up with some recommendations that go consistent with the data. If you go to the next slide really quickly, and we'll look at these data sets. Thank you. So this is an update. Before we looked at, we worked with our Highway Safety Office to be able to capture in the NHTSA manual. Aggressive driving is defined in the NHTSA manual as a contributor to a crash. And it includes the terminology of road rage as well in the definition of aggressive driving. So the Highway Safety Office pulled the data on any crash that had occurred that had aggressive driving / road rage listed as a contributor. And you can see kind of how the years break out and the seriousness of the crash in the descending order down to fatalities. So in 2023, if you go to the far right 2 columns, the end of the second quarter was the data we presented in June. And we updated that with the data that was close to the end of the third quarter, towards the latter part of September. And you can show we've seen some significant increases, specifically in the total number of fatalities that are listing that as at least one of the contributor in the fatalities. So help scope out at least how that's impacting our crash problem. As you can see, we're listing for so far this year, 20 fatalities for the year. If you kind of project that out through the rest of the year, you're going to see something similar. We're on a very consistent trend with what we've seen in the last 3 years. And keeping in mind, too, that in 2020 and 2021, we've seen significant increases in a lot of statistical issues that are of concern, specifically with roadway safety issue, this being one of them. If you go to the next slide, you look at, we basically pulled this from the UHP enforcement data. The reason we used the UHP enforcement data, we have troopers across the state, and it was a single RMS that we could have one tech go in and consistently pull information to be able to show enforcement issues that we take on violations that could be contributing or associated with road rage. And as you can see what those are, and similar to what we did before, showing the previous 3 years, as well as the kind of the delta between the second quarter of this year and the third quarter of this year which again shows consistent increases. If you do the math really quickly and project those out, you can see most of those are exceeding, very close to, or just under what we've seen over the last 3 years. The next slide is the final data set that we reported on last time, and that is using the 6 911 centers that the Department of Public Safety operates that are located throughout the state, one here in Salt Lake City and then the others in rural parts of the state. What we did is we pulled CAD data where we went into the CAD and we identified the same kind of terminology. So when you're looking at brandishing, what that comes from is there was a CAD entry where someone called 911, and in their description of what's going on, they used the word that they were brandishing a firearm, or they used the word road rage, or they used the word reckless driver. We included wrong way driver, used the word shots fired and pursuits. Specifically on the shots fired one, that one's probably a little bit artificially inflated because those dispatch centers also dispatch for local agencies as well, so that could be something that occurred off of a highway. If you go to the next slide, the additional thing we've done since last time is we dug into the Highway Patrol database, our own RMS system, and we did a word search through the narratives of every report that we've submitted over the last 12 months. And just being able to pull out the same kind of descriptors in criminal cases where there was a case number for a criminal case that was at least looked at for criminal charges. In that, we identified 32 cases in the last 12 months that were specifically related to aggressive driving or road rage, where that was described in the narrative, and in that identifying what was some of the more prominent things that we've seen within that narrative as well. Brandishing firearms was very well represented in half of them. Shots fired in nearly a quarter of them. Throwing objects was identified in 3 of those cases. And then other aggressive driving or traffic violations that met the level that it was at least described as either aggressive driving or road rage in another 10 of those. Again, just to kind of show that this is a real issue that we are actually responding to, and that is just information from one agency. We haven't been able to actually reach out and get that from other agencies, but we've had communications with them as well and seen the same type of things, and I think we've got some that may weigh in on that. So with that as well, going back to the Roadway Safety Committee, when we looked this issue back to our Road Safety Committee within the Law Enforcement Legislative Committee, we kind of looked at all of this and we identified, okay, what are the clear problems or the things that are challenges in doing this? We identified being able to collect consistent data. In our efforts to do this, that was identified that we were having a hard time pulling data on this issue because there's not a consistent, clear definition or a criminal code or a subject or an object code or how it's being put into RMS systems and CAD systems. The other thing we put out there is a problem or an obstacle to this is public perception and people being able to understand the seriousness of this issue and being able to communicate that, which again, we feel that being able to define it clearly and being able to represent that as we do our public outreach and we do our education, that would be better to be able to show this is what we're talking about and this is unacceptable and this is the potential consequences because of it. And then identified being able to prosecute cases that don't meet one of the other criteria of assault or something else that would be a criminal nature, even though it does rise to road rage. And then finally, the recommendations that working with the committee that we identified that a defining road rage or aggressive driving clearly in statute would be an advantage. A recommendation we had is, again, also evaluating current violations and potential enhancements or new violations that would be specific to this problem. And the third strategy for recommendation from that committee was to evaluate the potential for using administrative actions associated to conduct that we can specifically define as this. Other administrative actions we use other places are driver's license sanctions through one mechanism or another, impounding vehicles, either being directed to or having that as an option to be a state tax impound when a vehicle's involved in that. Mandatory education is something we've used on other issues as a sanction when someone is identified to be able to involve in that, and then opened any other solutions to really, from an administrative perspective, or other ways to do that as well. And that's the end of what I have to present.
Okay, we've got a couple questions from committee. Representative Ward.
It's me.
Yeah, it is you.
Oh, Light?
I yield my time to Representative Johnson.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Colonel, for all you do, and thank you, Representative, for bringing this. I doubt if there's a person in here who hasn't either witnessed road rage or have had something happen to them where they get kind of angered by the stupid stuff somebody's done to them. When you have these statistics, do these numbers include what happens, say, with county sheriffs or with what happens with police departments, capturing that data from those institutions as well as Highway Patrol?
So the first data set that we shared, the one specific to crashes, that is statewide data involving all agencies, and we worked that through the Highway Safety Office. The reason we were able to collect that consistently for all agencies is because the crash report does contain a contributor that lists it as road rage or aggressive driving. So the officer investigating the crash, if they feel like that was the contributor, they can list that as a contributor to the crash. And that's what's represented there, and that represents all the crash reports that were submitted for those years from every agency. The other data sets are only representative of either DPS dispatch centers or Highway Patrol enforcement data, and we did that because there's not a consistent definition across agencies, across RMS systems, across CAD systems. And so to be able to collect at least as consistent a data as possible, representing only one agency in the state, but one that covers the entire state, those are just either DPS communication centers or Highway Patrol enforcement data, and it's just representative of that.
Just to
Go
follow
ahead.
up, Mr. Chair, thanks. Is that something that you would consider, or do you think it's important to have that road rage data once that's identified, and then, include data then that is happening with like local police departments and county sheriffs?
Absolutely, and when we take this to the LELC, Law Enforcement Legislative Committee, and specifically the Road Safety Subcommittee, it's representative of representatives from the Chiefs Association, representatives from the Sheriff's Association, prosecutors, and that was clearly identified by pretty much everybody looking at this, is that a consistent data collection is a challenge without a clear statutory definition.
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing this up, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to have you here, and I'm glad that you're thinking about it, because I think those numbers collected and them being accurate is going to have a big influence on what kind of legislation gets asked for, and influences us to do the right thing to help you.
Thank you. Representative Christofferson.
Thank you. I know the main goal is to define road rage first, but I'm sure that you've been thinking about it. What are the elements of the road rage do you think you'd like to have in the definition?
We have a proposed definition, but I'll let the good Colonel give his opinion. Hopefully, the things we put in the definition match his opinion.
I think they will, hopefully word for word. But no. So if I was to just to put it really quickly, there's bad driving behavior, and that someone's just doing something foolishly and recklessly that is just trying to facilitate their movement or doing something other. But then there comes times when that behavior targets another vehicle or targets the occupants of another vehicle, and it can manifest itself in a lot of ways, in an assault, in throwing objects, in brandishing firearms. And when that becomes targeted towards another vehicle specifically, whether it's traffic violations or other criminal violations, I think that's when you're getting into there where we can clearly say that that's road rage or aggressive driving.
And so you have a proposed definition that you're going to be presenting?
We do, and if Rachel's willing to bring that up, I think that's the next thing that we had planned
great.
to move towards.
Okay, is Will Carlson part of your presentation?
He is, yes.
Okay.
If that's acceptable to the chairs.
No, that's good.
Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate it. So, Rachel, if you'll jump to the next slide, and we'll invite Will to come and join me. But as the Colonel mentioned, we all have the goal, and we believe it's a fundamental responsibility of government to keep people safe. And so this is our objective is to make our roads safer. As the Colonel mentioned, the first challenge is how do we define this so we can better track and report on road rage? And this is the definition that we're using as the draft. Commission of one or more moving traffic offenses with the intent to endanger or intimidate another individual, or an assault with a motor vehicle or dangerous weapon by the operator or passenger of a motor vehicle precipitated by an incident on the roadway. And I think one of the key things here is the word, the intent. Because we can all agree that accidentally crashing your car into another car is a very different offense than intentionally endangering another person by intentionally crashing into somebody or intentionally trying to intimidate another individual. So this is the definition that we're started with. We'd love some feedback on this definition and would hope that the Transportation Committee would weigh in on that.
Representative Peterson, do you still have a question? Okay, go ahead, and then we'll come back to Chair Christopherson.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
and thank you for looking at this for us. We can't be the only state that's going through this.
Correct.
And so I'm wondering what, if you've looked at what other states have done, and when you've implemented, for example, enhancements, did it make a difference?
That's a great question. Our legislative research has been looking into some definitions in California, which we don't always think is a great example when you think of the problems they have on their highways. New York has instituted another approach. And maybe a way to think of it is different states have handled this differently. And in fact, this leads to the next slide, if you can, Rachel. My understanding is some states are looking at this as an enhancement. The things we're talking about are already crimes. It's a crime to intentionally to crash into another vehicle intentionally, or to brandish a weapon. We can put an enhancement on top of that as part of if it meets the definition of road rage. Another approach is to define a new crime, and I believe that's what the state of New York did, is define it as a new crime of aggressive driving or was it assault with a
It was aggressive driving.
aggressive driving that they used. So, and then we have a third option that we're going to talk about, which is a new crime plus enhancement. So those are some options that other states are taking. I don't have great confidence yet that this is making a difference, that what one state has done is better than another state yet. I think we're still investigating that. I'm not sure if Will has an opinion on that, or Rachel or the other folks that have been helping us with the research, or even the Colonel.
Will, go ahead, identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairs, and members of the committee. Will Carlson from the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office. Representative Cutler's correct that a lot of states have recognized this problem, but not many states have figured out this is the magic bullet that will resolve this issue. And I don't mean to use the term bullet lightly in this context. But the three different strategies have either been enhance the crime that we know has been committed, whether that's speeding or tailgating or changing a lane without accurately signaling, or aggravated assault or brandishing, or to create a new offense, such as New York did with its aggressive driving, or a combination of the two. If we could move down in the slides. One example is the enhancement approach, and that would be to take whatever crime you know that they committed and increase it by one level if you also know that it was part of a road rage incident. So for example, reckless driving is a Class B misdemeanor under Utah law, and you commit reckless driving when you drive with willful or wanton disregard for the safety of others. And two examples in the code are if you commit 3 or more violations within a short distance, or if you're driving over 105 miles an hour at the time. And so that would be a Class B misdemeanor under current law, but if we did an enhancement approach, we would say, well, if there's also evidence that they did that as part of road rage, that would be a Class A misdemeanor. Short of enhancing the level of the offense, you could also trigger certain mandatory consequences, which Colonel Rapich talked about a little bit. For example, if an officer has probable cause to believe that road rage has occurred, they must tow the vehicle, and that would provide an immediate consequence for that individual. We've talked about points, or adding a new offense separate from, or a mandatory fine, saying you must pay at least $500 or $1,000, whatever number, saying if you find that this person committed this crime as part of a road rage incident, you have to impose a certain consequence. Separate from that would be the option of a new criminal offense.
which is here. Do you
All
want to
right.
talk about that?
So this chart shows two crimes that exist in Utah and one that does not right now. Right now, careless driving is a criminal offense in the state of Utah, and you commit careless driving if you drive two or more, or you commit two or more traffic violations within 3 miles, or if you commit one violation and you're a distracted driver, like you're texting while you're doing it. That's how you commit the offense of careless driving, and it's a Class C misdemeanor. Reckless driving under current law, as I mentioned, is willful or wanton disregard for the safety of others. And two examples are driving over 105 miles an hour or committing 3 or more violations within 3 miles. New York proposed a third level of driving, which is aggressive driving. And their definition in their state is creating a substantial risk of serious physical injury to a person, or displays a deadly weapon while operating a vehicle, or places another person in reasonable fear of physical injury or death. And just like we have a Class C misdemeanor for careless driving and a Class B misdemeanor for reckless driving, we could have a Class A misdemeanor for this aggressive driving if we take that approach. The third option would be to do both in a way, where you could say, we're going to create this new aggressive driving for the most heinous of offenses, but for any time when you commit a traffic offense and there's evidence that you were also doing that as a part of road rage, that fundamental underlying crime could be enhanced one level to a class higher than the offense. One problem with that approach is it would still be difficult to track, because it would be difficult to pull the data on how many speeding tickets were speeding versus speeding as part of road rage. The benefit of a separate offense is that it's easier to track. The disadvantage of the separate offense, or the most apparent disadvantage, is that you're going to need a witness, whether that's the other person who was the victim of the road rage or a third party that saw what was occurring, so that you could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person was driving in a way that endangered others or with a specific intent, which we would not be able to prove just with the actions of one specific car driving, even with video footage necessarily.
Thank you. So I guess our ask today is twofold: just to increase awareness of the problem and the various ways that we're approaching this, and second, to get committee's feedback, number one, on the definition, which was on the earlier slide. Does this definition seem to meet our intent? And then also the approach, whether we go the enhancement route or consider it a new offense. So we'd welcome those of us who are working, and I would include Representative Perucci, who stepped out. She's been working on this as well. We'd love your feedback on that and any advice on how to proceed, or any comments you have.
There are lots of comments and questions. We will go to Chair Christofferson. Okay, then we'll go over to Senator Buxton, and then Representative Ward.
I got distracted there for a minute, forgot my question, but I think if you're out at 105 miles an hour in the middle of nowhere and a highway patrolman stops you because you're going 105, you're endangering who? Yourself or other public that might be coming the other way, I guess?
I think driving 105 by yourself is already covered under the reckless driving. That, to me, that would not meet this definition of road rage, but I'm not the prosecutor. If you were speeding and tailgating and you went after another person with the intent to intimidate or to escalate, let's say you had an altercation and they tried to get away from you because they were trying to de-escalate the situation, get away, and you chase them at 105,
That'd be another story.
then that would be an escalation, or that would be your intent to endanger them, and it would be precipitated by an incident on a roadway. So if there's no incident on a roadway, it's not road rage.
We're talking about laws in California and we're talking about laws in New York. I've driven to both places and I can understand that kind of. But what about an area the size of Utah and the congestion of Utah and other parts of the country? Because we do things a little differently here. We drive a little differently. I don't know, it's starting to feel more like California lately. But what about states that aren't quite so populated?
I don't know that we have a lot of data there. I'm not very proud that some national publication rated us some of the worst drivers in the state in the nation. I hope we can fix that.
This was an area where we were hoping to find a clear answer. Most states, while acknowledging that road rage is a problem, don't have a clear codified response to road rage.
I experienced that just yesterday, pulling a trailer full of my home goods, moving, and I signaled, changed lanes, and some guy come up on the back of me. I don't know, he was going a lot faster than the speed limit. Of course, he pulls around me and he pulls right back in front of me. He's going like this, and I'm going, you know, I was polite, and I didn't salute him. But you have all kinds of road rage, you know. I'm thinking, okay, is this guy gonna stop and come back, you know, because we pulled up to a red light? I thought, yeah, we'll see. I got two big guys sitting beside me. We won't worry about him.
And we discussed that. Is just somebody expressing their opinion about your driving road rage. And it doesn't seem to me like expressing your opinion about somebody else's driving meets this, this definition, that you have to commit offenses and have the intent to endanger or intimidate, or there has to be an incident and on a roadway that leads to an assault.
Thank you. Let's go to Representative Ward.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I'm understanding right, if it's just a traffic violation, then it wouldn't enhance. So if I'm speeding only, then there would be no way that I could get a road rage, or could I get a road rage?
The enhancement approach would mean that officers, if they pulled you over for speeding, could cite you for speeding, and that's the end of it.
Yep.
Or if they, in investigating the incident, saw that you were speeding because you were trying to catch up with someone else after they had cut you off, and there was evidence suggesting that there was a reason behind your speeding related to road rage, they could cite you for speeding at one level higher. That's what the enhancement approach would do.
So we have felonies and misdemeanors, and then I guess we have just offenses that are not misdemeanors.
So
Like speeding
there's-
isn't a misdemeanor, right?
There's infractions, which is where you get a
Infractions.
fine that's no jail. Then you've got misdemeanors, C,
But it would
B,
still enhance
A.
from an infraction to a misdemeanor.
If you committed an infraction and it was enhanced, it would go to a Class C misdemeanor. If you committed a Class C misdemeanor and it was enhanced, it would go to a Class B. Class B would become a Class A. A Class A misdemeanor with a road rage enhancement would become a third-degree felony, and so on.
And I guess in my head, I think of infractions different from crime. It would, so I don't know if that's a real distinction or not, but if it is, then this would move things that previously weren't crime at all. It was an infraction for which you paid a ticket up to being a crime that would take you through the courts.
Up until 2015, I believe, it was a Class B misdemeanor for many traffic offenses. As part of JRI, or whatever you want to call it, restructuring.
Sure.
We decided most traffic things should just be infraction level offenses, and so we pulled them all down as a state.
Sure, and then this would start to climb some of them back up in, right, the
Yes.
other way. I mean, is the main philosophical underpinnings for doing it, is it mainly because we have strong belief this will make the roads safer, that we do believe that, or is it a philosophical belief that these people are bad enough that they need to be punished because it's morally right? Or is it the philosophical underpinning because we believe more data is always good and this will allow us to measure more data?
My opinion is, first, that we ought to, that road rage or the intent to try to intimidate or endanger another person is different than just doing a traffic violation. And therefore, the punishment should be different if you're intending to intimidate or harm another person while using a motor vehicle. So that's my opinion.
We know that some things will have a deterrent effect. The three keys for deterring conduct are certain consequences, certainty of getting caught, swift consequences, and then the third, and it's the distant third, is increasing the severity of consequences. If we, for example, said, if officers have a mandate to tow whenever road rage occurs, that swift consequence right there, we know, based on the evidence, would have a deterrent effect on that conduct.
Okay.
As far as increasing the penalty level, that's the third, and it's the distant third.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think these are good reactions to the problem. What I'm concerned about is that we're missing kind of the proactive approach of getting people before they are in a rage situation, both as our youth are taking and others are taking driver education. Right now there's only one paragraph in the driver manual about it. Is there any thought about doing more education either with driver education or in broader marketing about the dangers of this? And then the second question is the common predicate to most road rage, the statistics that Colonel Rapids state was speeding. And Will, you mentioned that one of the components of this is getting caught. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we're doing enough enforcement of speeding to stop them before they're getting to the rage situation, and then. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
On the first, I think that's a great idea to have an education component. We hadn't considered that, but if my other legislators working on this are open to it, I think finding a way to enhance education without incurring too much cost is a really great idea. And part of the goal of this is to raise the awareness with the public. That can be done through public information, but also, I think, starting with our driver's instruction is a great idea. As far as speeding enforced enough, that's a matter of opinion. When I was the mayor in my city, there were many people who thought speeding was enforced too much, and there were many others who thought it wasn't enforced enough.
Okay, thank you. Senator Anderegg.
Oh, I love enhancements. Can you send me that research you apparently have found that shows that the enhancements actually act as a deterrent?
As a distant third, I want to be clear.
Yeah, because that's the whole thing is we've done a lot of search. I've had our attorneys do a lot of search, and I can't find it.
I can send it to you. It'll show a distant
Okay.
third.
Because one of my concerns is this. Anyone who is experiencing road rage doesn't stop and think, I better not do this because it's going to go from a Class B to a Class A. In fact, I don't think they're thinking much at all. And so, as an example, so I commute up and down to Salt Lake City from Lehigh nearly every single day. And I'm in the commuter lane, I've got my pass, so I'm there legally, and this dude comes up, and he's riding me, and he gets frustrated because I'm probably already speeding. I think I'm doing 75 or something like that. So this is the third time I've admitted to speeding in open public meeting.
Won't you change your behavior? That's part of an educational process.
I was going with the flow of traffic. And I wasn't excessively speeding. But so he flies around me in this, and he nearly drives me into the other guy. And so I had luckily talked to Colonel Raplich, and he said, you can do a citizen's arrest. So I jump on the phone with Highway Patrol, and I follow this guy. And we get all the way from the point of the mountain, all the way down to Provo City Center, when the Highway Patrol pulls him over, and I pull behind them, and Highway Patrol comes back and talks to us. And I'm sitting here going, this is what happened. And he comes back to the car after talking to the other guy and says, well, he says you did this. I was like, that never happened. The guy's a frickin' liar. And because I'm the only one in the car, I'm not doing this, If I had a passenger, we probably could. So you said, okay, the preponderance of the evidence. How's that even possible? Unless you are the police officer and witness it. 90% of all this is happening outside of the vision of a police officer. So as much as I love enhancements and as much as I want to work on road rage, number one, I still haven't found the data that shows that it actually deters. And number two, enforcement is really non-existent unless it's done under the eyes of a law enforcement officer, and we simply don't have enough officers. So as much as I appreciate the bill and its intent, this is just like all the other enhancement bills that you and I have debated over the last 11 years. They look good on paper, but in practice, I just don't see that they're actually deterring anything. In fact, I see things getting worse. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Looks like we have Representative Perucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Representative Cutler and Will's work on this. I had a baby in the middle of the working group, so I haven't been as engaged, but I have appreciated, I've read up on a lot of the conversation that's happened. I think in looking at the definition, and it looks like there would be the discretion of the officer a little bit too. I don't know Senator Endrick, although I'm impressed you followed him. I don't know that would actually fall under if, right, with the intent to endanger or intimidate or harm. It sounds like the guy was just PO'd, right? Like he was just ticked off. But so I guess it would be up to an officer's discretion then in the he said, she said. But we put officers in that situation every day when they're dealing with traffic crashes, accidents, right, that they have to go back and forth on. I do think as we, and this was supposed to be like an a la carte discussion on policies to get feedback from the committee. So I think this is really helpful on the enhancement piece. I think for me, the appealing piece was looking at an educational component, which we talked about initially when we opened the bill as well, but then looking at the discretion of, with the severity of the incident, a discretionary tow. I'm not a big fan of mandating a tow, but I think that would really wake someone up. And just like we had the public awareness campaigns around drinking and driving and wearing your seatbelts, it really woke people up and giving them a head start saying, hey, in 6 months, we're gonna start ticketing on this, right? And seeing if that would change behavior. So anyways, I think it's helpful to hear the feedback, but I also think the way that this is crafted, and it could be crafted and tailored even more to make it more narrow and targeted. This one of the situations in my area that came up was an individual who had tried to run in to the other car, and that person had braked, is my understanding, and the person who was trying to hit them flipped their own car, ended up on the side of the road, and the officer got there. You can't charge him with road rage when clearly he was trying to use his vehicle to hit another vehicle. And to me, that's an extreme case that we're trying to catch. I don't see this as someone who's dropping the F-bomb, flipping you off. That kind of happens, right? But this is supposed to be, I think, for really egregious cases. And so the more we can tailor this to be fine-tuned, I think will be helpful in the policy.
Thank you. That wraps up the lights that I have. Representative Cutler? Where do you want to go with this?
Well, I appreciate the feedback from the committee. I think we'll take the suggestion to focus, what can we do to put some more education, of an education component is a good suggestion, and to look more carefully at this definition. I agree with Representative Perucci, and the intent is not to catch everybody who's, sharing their opinion about your driving, but only to take the most egregious cases and find a way to have an immediate consequence, such as an optional tow if the officer thinks, hey, this person is out of control, I need to take the vehicle out of their hands before they hurt somebody else. And then look at some of these additional potential penalties, making them worse, to say, look, this is a serious crime in Utah. We're serious about the safety of our people. We want to protect our roadways.
Okay. So I think you've got a lot of input. I appreciate you picking this up. This is a priority of the committee. We want to go through and put as many guardrails and as much education as possible into this so that people act better. Cell phones are quite distracting, as are other things within the vehicle and outside. But the more we can improve the process and the some of the standards that are out there and consequences, I think the better it will be. So thank you very much, and we look forward to what you bring back next time.
Thank you.
Okay. We're now going to go down to item number 5 on the agenda. We'll hear from Ben Hewitt, Andrew Gruber, Michelle Carroll, and Nicole Bordeaux on Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. And we'll go in that order. So Ben, Andrew, Michelle, and then Nicole. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, and then there will be this mini little thing here that will be passed out to the committee. Okay, so we're going to have Nicole and Ben first.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, chairs, members of the committee. Ben Hewitt, UDOT Deputy Director for Planning and Investment. I'm going to do a brief intro and provide some background on Utah's Unified Transportation Plan, and then we have representatives from Utah Transit Authority and the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, and they're going to go over some more details of the process and the plan. So as far as some intro and background, Utah's Unified Transportation Plan, it's made up of the Metropolitan Planning Organization's regional transportation plans and UDOT's long-range plan for areas that are outside of the of the MPOs. But it's more than just a simple combination of all of those plans. The Unified Transportation Plan provides a framework for shared assumptions. It provides a shared framework for things like financial assumptions, time horizons, and provides a really collaborative process that allows all of those individual plans to fit together at the end of this process into this Unified Transportation Plan. So these plans are updated on a 4-year cycle. The plans can be and are amended during that 4-year time period, but every 4 years there is a full update, and that's where we're at this point now. So a couple key things about Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. It's a comprehensive plan. It identifies transportation needs from now until 2050. It's statewide, developed with input from local governments and the public. There's a lot of work that goes into gathering all that input and meeting with the public and providing opportunities to weigh in on the discussion and the plan. It includes statewide priorities for capacity with specific projects, but it also accounts for maintenance and operations in things like the financial assumptions of the plan. Those projects that it does include, they are multimodal. So this plan includes state and local roads, state and local road projects, transit projects, and active transportation projects. So a few other items about this plan. Utah's plan, it's nationally recognized by USDOT and others as a best practice model for collaboration in transportation planning. And this work, especially this cycle of of Utah's Unified Transportation Plan, it was done in the name of preserving and enhancing quality of life even as we grow as a state. That was one of the things that builds upon some of the work that was done previously in developing Utah's transportation vision. So with that, there's just some of the key points that you'll probably hear in more of the process and details. It's a collaborative plan. It's holistic in that it's statewide, it's multimodal. It considers things like context, like land use in the development of these transportation projects and plans. And it's a response to the growth that we are experiencing as a state. So with that, turn it over to Nicole to go over some of the details of the plan.
Thank you, Ben. Nicole Bordeaux, Chief Planning and Engagement Officer for UTA. I'm excited because I get to walk you through the interactive map. This is the flagstone product for the Unified Plan. And set some time for yourself when you dive in, because it's fun and you may stay there for hours looking at all these great projects we've put together. So beginning, we're gonna look at how you can turn filters off and on and what the different layers are. So we're going to cache MPO here, and you can see all of the projects, and as Ben said, they are in multimodal, so there is transit, highways, and active transportation, which is a great view of us working together in that collaboration and thinking about transportation as a whole and not individually. Another way to look at it is modes, right? So if you want to see all of the transit in this area, you can see the transit projects as they have been broken up through that area as well. We'll look at the phases, as Ben mentioned about the funding. We work together to look at those phases, and phase one would show assumed funding and a phase one need. So each project that you see highlighted here, you know that's the first phase in funding and a first phase in need. And of course, we want to show our regions. So as you work with your communities and local stakeholders work with their communities, it's really great to break it up into the organizations that we work for. So here you're looking at UDOT Region 3, what projects are there, and it's all of the projects, again, active transportation, highways, and transit. So the community can understand what projects are in their area and what UDOT region they respond to. So moving to House districts. So this is really great. I love this because now each stakeholder can look at what is affecting their constituents in their area and bring that up and dive in. I'm going to show a couple of examples, but here we go to House District 7, and you can see all the projects as well. And then there's also a layer here, so you can see which projects are in phase one, which projects are in phase two. So again, here's your layer for the House district and as well as the Senate district as well. You could do that.
So remind everyone what phase 1 and 2 and 3 are.
Phase one, and we can bring this up on the screen as well. Phase one would be phase one in funding, and then phase one in need. And so that's how the plan is evaluated through. And if you look at the bottom right of the screen, it says phases, and you can see it's 2023 to 2032. And then phase two, the horizon is 2033 to 2042, and then so on to 2043, thank you, to 2050. I need my glasses. And then we also have another layer that's needs with no assumed funding right now. So you could see that as well, just so that we're collaborating on those projects that need our attention in the future. So we can do some examples here of some projects. We're going to start with Purgatory Road. As you can see, committee members, it's fiscally constrained for phase one and that timeline of 2023 through 2032. It's assumed phase funding, and then phase needed, of course, is one. You can see the cost, and as Ben mentioned, we're looking at maintenance and operation costs as well. And these are our folks in Dixie at the MPO and their area and their project. Another example, as we look at strategic double tracking, which is a little, something in my heart for Frontrunner. This is a transit project, of course, and we're actually looking at it in Utah County. So this jurisdiction is MAG. You can see it's in phase one, and phase one for funding as well as need, the cost there, and then the region as well as our MPO. And then we would move on to our WFRC area and Hill Air Force Base and 3-Gate Trail. Again, this is an active transportation project. It tells you where the locations are, what the cost assumptions are in that year of funding, so it was 2022. And again, a region, county, and then a description of the shared use path. And finally, we will look up at Cache, that beautiful area right now, looking at Main Street. And this is a highway project. And so Cache MPO, first phase, it's, excuse me, it shows here it's phase two. Well, there we go. It's phase one and phase one needed. And then it's also the location that you can see. And of course, it's in region 1 of UDOT and county cache. And the description is to enhance capacity. So that is a quick overview. I would encourage you to look at this map, and hopefully our public will, because it's so fun to work with. And I'll turn the time over to Andrew. Thank you, committee.
Thanks. Before you go, Ben, though, question on the, what phase do you start to get right of way?
I guess it depends on the specific project, but one way to, like on a state route, one way would be is if there is a phase one project that is on the ranked list for prioritization, the Transportation Commission would have the ability then to fund certain phases of the project. But I guess anything, let's see if I misspeak, anything in the plan is eligible for corridor preservation?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so corridor preservation, so short of identifying it specifically as a project at that point in time, there can be right-of-way purchased through corridor preservation for any of the projects on the long-range plan.
And what determines whether you get it in phase one or phase three, whatever? You know, what, is it just the opportunity that you have to get that, or what tells you which ones to look at first?
Yeah, I mean, generally, the projects fall along the phases of the long-range plan, but when it comes to corridor preservation, it's a little bit more of opportunity. I think that when opportunities arise, if there is a project on the plan, there is the ability to use that for preserving that future right-of-way.
Okay.
So it's, I don't know if there's the hard and fast rule on that, but sometimes it's, hey, this one's available even though it's maybe phase two or something. Now's the time to do this prior to any kind of development.
Well, and sometimes like on a freeway or a big arterial or something like that, you might have to look out further down the road before that corridor's
Right.
Taken by homes or developments or something.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate it. We do have a question from Representative Garner.
Yes, and may have maybe for the previous presenter. So just looking at the funding snapshot, right now you have these donuts showing a really big donut for state roads, not as big donut for local roads, a smaller donut for transit, and a very small donut for active transportation. And when we look at this going forward, is that what we're going to be seeing? What does that look like in the future? Are we seeing like a 1%, keeping at 1% for active transportation, or are we expanding that pie and shrinking the road pie, or what's the plan there?
You know, that's probably up to us.
Yeah.
Because we fund those, so I think it's a policy issue where you go, I mean, you go ahead and answer that if you like, but I think it's a legislative decision.
Thank you, representatives. And Andrew Gruber, I'm Executive Director of the Wasatch Front Regional Council, joined by my partner, Michelle Carroll, who's Executive Director of the Mountainland Association of Governments. I also want to note Jeff Gilbert from Cash MPO is with us as well. Representative, you anticipated exactly the next portion of our discussion here, which is about funding. So if I may, I want to back up a little bit, give a little broader context about funding, and then we'll come to the policy questions that Representative Christopherson was noting, okay?
Is it okay to interrupt one more time? We'd like to hear from Representative, or Senator Andrig.
You can call me representative, that's fine. Funding was going to be my big question, because you're showing $600 million for transit, and is that assuming what the legislature has put in, or is that assuming infrastructure funding dollars that you're going after, you've already submitted application, or UTA submitted application on? Because my understanding is that the first, second, third, fourth, fifth local option sales taxes are primarily going towards maintenance and operations. There's very little capital development money in that. So I'm curious, you know, the assumption was, when we looked at this, the assumption was full funding. At least that's what the previous presenter said, you know, and that's what you need in order to develop the plan. But actual funding is far from that. So where does that $600 million plus for transit come from?
I am also going to answer that question.
Thank you.
Senator Anderegg. Members of the committee, let me just say how thrilled we are to be with you today. What you've already heard Ben say is that all of the transportation agencies in Utah come together collaboratively to develop this Utah Unified Transportation Plan that looks out decades into the future at all of the transportation needs, state road, local road, transit, active transportation, new capacity that's needed to deal with our growth, as well as maintenance and preservation and operation of the existing system. We're proud of this work, and I should just say that just right now in this committee, because of the role, the critical role that you in this committee and the legislature has, this is the first time that this updated Unified Transportation Plan is being shared publicly. We wanted to, of course, bring it to you first. My job right now is to talk about funding issues, and it's really important that when we do our transportation planning and we make assumptions about the availability of funding, that you, at the legislature, that the local governments, and then more broadly, that the residents of the state of Utah, the taxpayers, can have confidence that the public dollars that are being invested in transportation are being used prudently. And that we are addressing the really significant transportation demands and needs that we confront in Utah. So that starts, and Nicole was getting to this to some degree, with first identifying what we would call an unconstrained, financially unconstrained project list. We identify all the potential transportation needs across all of those modes from now out to 2050, and to Representative Christopherson's point that he often raises, even thinking beyond that for corridor preservation. We then go through a process, and I'm boiling down the work of many, many organizations over the course of 4 years into one diagram, but we take all of those projects and we prioritize them based on need. Nicole was mentioning need-based phasing and financially constrained phasing. We first evaluate those based on the need. When are projects going to need to be built based on the travel demand and the growth that we have? But then critically, we also apply financial constraint, because we do not presume that we will have all of the money needed to build every transportation project that's identified. We don't think that would be fiscally prudent. In fact, we don't think that would be politically prudent, to be candid. So we constrain the planned projects based on the projected availability of revenue into the phases. Nicole mentioned this phase, temporal phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then there are some projects that we don't presume there's going to be enough revenue available. Those projects are then unfunded in the plan. Okay, so now let's go to the next table, and what I want to show you here is on the left side is the total prioritized the total transportation needs, and on the right side is after we prioritize those in the way that I just described, applying financial constraint. And you see, we're dealing with big numbers here. This is today's dollars from 2023 to 2050, aggregated. There's $153 billion, roughly. We're rounding to the nearest billion here, but $153 billion in transportation needs. And what you can see there, the colors, is breaking that out by mode. So road capacity in orange, then road maintenance, preservation, and operations, and then transit capacity and transit maintenance, preservation, and operations, and then finally at the bottom, active transportation, so trails, capacity, and maintenance. And then the 113 is after we have applied the financial constraint. That's what is actually included in the financially constrained plan. So now, if you remember those numbers, 153 and 113, let's go to that donut chart here. This looks at the revenue. Now, I said there was $153 billion in total need identified. If you add up everything in this table, in this donut, that's the full $153 billion. But as I also said, we do not presume that we're going to have the funding available to implement all of the projects. So if you take $94 billion and $18 billion, that adds up to the prioritized, roughly prioritized $113 billion of projects, which are the ones that we presume to be funded in the plan. Now, I want to explain this just for a moment. Existing revenue, $94 billion, what that means is that the revenue sources that are in place now, most of which have been authorized through state legislation over the years. So think gas tax, motor fuel tax, or its equivalent with a road usage charge over time. Think local option sales taxes. The revenue sources that are in place now, federal funding sources that come in, those are so-called existing revenue sources, and we take those and we do financial modeling and analysis that looks back at historic performance and then projects ahead at economic trends, and then we assume that those revenue sources will generate about $94 billion between now and 2050. That's if we didn't do anything else on policy, to the policy point that you were making before. The plan also then assumes that policy decisions will be made that will generate additional revenue for transportation. That sums to the $18 billion roughly. Now, we don't know that's going to happen. Those are decisions that we all working together will have to decide. Additional local option transportation sales taxes, additional vehicle registration fees, other new funding sources that are identified. We project another $18 billion. Even if that happened, and that is a big lift right there, $18 billion of additional revenue, there would still be near $40 billion of projects that are needed, but that we don't have funding available to access. So, when you go to the maps that Nicole was showing you, you can see on there what phases are projects in, and are they needed, and when are they needed, and are they funded for purposes of the Unified Transportation Plan. And when we say funded for the plan purposes, we mean existing revenues plus presumed future revenues, okay? Senator Anderegg, you asked a question about, well, these revenue sources that are available in the future for transit, for example. Let's, Mike, go down to the next, Mike Sobczak, right there, driving. This chart, it's the same color scheme that I was just talking about with you, but this shows it by mode of transportation. Representative Garner, getting to your point, okay? So the green, again, are the revenue sources that are available, that are in place today, and their projected growth over time. The gray lines are the presumed additional revenue sources that would be implemented, and then the red is remaining need that we're not, for planning purposes, assuming will be available. But this breaks it by state road, local road, transit, and then active transportation. So, Senator Anderegg, on the transit line, for example, there's a total of $34.5 billion of total projected transit need statewide between now and 2050. And the green line there, the green box there, assumes continuation of local option sales taxes, continuation of federal funding sources, and it makes certain projections about grants applied for and capital project funding that's coming in that are based on historical averages projecting forward. Then the gray for transit makes assumptions about the availability of additional local option sales taxes, and then the possibility of new revenue sources coming in, which still doesn't get to all of the transit needs. Now, this is, again, up until this point, I've been talking in really big numbers, aggregated 23 to 2050, and then expressed in today's dollars. But what happens in a given year? The last thing I want to show you is, if we go to the last chart, this is just 1 year. This is a 2024 funding snapshot, which is based on what we actually know is happening in transportation funding. And what you can see is, again, now we're broken out by mode again: state roads, local roads, transit, and active transportation. And the colors here, well, first of all, the donuts, the pies, are sized relatively to the amount of money that we are collectively investing in each mode of transportation in a given year, an average year. So you see, of course, state roads, that's a UDOT system, is getting the most investment. It's absorbing the majority of travel. Local roads, transit, and then active transportation, representative, a little smaller, right? But it's good that it's there. It wasn't actually even always there. That's grown because of the terrific commitment that the state has now made, and we say thank you to investing in the Utah Trail Network. What you see also here on this is that the colors represent the funding sources. Blue are state funding, yellow is federal funding, and then green is local funding. And so you can see the funding mix for each mode of transportation is different. This gives you a sense of what is happening in place. So the conclusion to your question, Representative, which was, well, is that where we're always going to be, that sort of level of relative funding? As Representative Christopherson said, that's a policy decision to make. The plan in the aggregate over roughly 30 years assesses what the needs are and what revenue sources may be available, but that doesn't mean all of those sources are yet in place. This is what we know will happen next year, and then we have to work together to make sure we're making the prudent decisions about generating revenue and investing it in the way that's going to serve the needs of Utah as it grows into the future. That's the funding overview.
Okay, thank you. Senator Andrade would like to follow up on that.
Yeah, on this transit portion of it, which I appreciate. I see what you're doing here. The problem I have is that these are looking at what numbers we've already set in place for transportation. This is money that you're assuming because we've already spent it. We've already put it into play, right?
That
So-
correct, on on this chart for 1 year, but Mike, if you can go up one more chart to this one. Now, this is
Over
over the
time.
course of time from now to 2050. So it's sources in place now and then assumptions about the future as well.
Which I understand. Go back down, if you would, to
Okay.
the donuts. Because the transit is still 80% coming from local funding. My problem I have with this here is you're looking at the dollars irrespective of what O&M is. This isn't capital development money. There's no way 80% is going to capital development on transit from first, second, third, fourth, and fifth local option sales tax. Where's the rest of that money coming from? Is this coming from federal? Because the light blue you're showing as local funding. You're saying 80% of $687 million is coming from local, statewide, and that's going into capital development?
No, thank you for the question, for enabling me to clarify. May I?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. The on-transit, 80% of the total amount of money that's being spent, that we expect will be spent on transit statewide in 2024 is coming from local sources, not only for capital projects, for maintenance, and for operation. All transit costs in. And when we say local here, that means local option sales taxes that the legislature has authorized, that the counties have imposed. That's the largest single source of funding for transit. It's also transit fares, it's advertising revenue that transit agencies are generating. That makes up the lion's share of the spending that happens on transit statewide for all
I
sources.
appreciate that, Andrew.
Okay.
I really do. Mr. Chair, if I may, how much of that $687 million is actually going to capital development projects on an annual basis?
Oh, what's the split of that total between new capital projects?
Yeah, so my understanding is $290 million is coming from Salt Lake County, and Utah County is going to be much less than that. Weber Davis is going to be much less than that.
And those are used for capital projects, new capital, debt service, maintenance and preservation, and operations. And I'm sorry, I don't have the off the top of my head,
The reason I'm bringing
split.
it up,
Yeah.
you understand why I'm bringing it up, is that my understanding is that what's actually available for capital development is between 20 and 40 million of the 687 million.
Okay, so there's the point, and thank you. And yes, because most of that money in that 687 million is committed to operating the existing system, maintaining the existing system, paying debt service on bonds that were issued to construct the existing system. And this is part
Close
of
to
the
300 million, is my understanding, is what?
the annual debt service.
The annual debt service,
I
interest
don't
and
remember
principal.
off the top of my head. If somebody wants
Hopefully.
to answer that question, they can. But you are highlighting, or at least giving me the opportunity to highlight the fact that there are unmet needs in transit and across the entirety of the system. And that's why I took you up to the chart above this, which says, what are the total needs over time and how much of them are funded from existing sources? And so we actually, there is a chart earlier. Mike, will you go back to that one, please? That actually, now this is, again, it's over the course of 30 years. This is showing if you look on the right side there, you see a breakout by on transit capacity is a $10 billion number, and then a $19 billion number for transit maintenance, preservation, and operation. So this chart is showing the distinction
Okay, yeah.
between capital and the new capital. And I would just say that, in the interest of time, we have lots more detail on this, and there is more detail on the website, and we would be happy with you, Senator, or with anybody to dig more into the details of any of this. We aggregate it for public consumption, but we'd be happy to go through any of the details if necessary.
Chair, if I may, just one last statement is, I just want to say from myself, you know, Andrew, we've had a long friendship here, so I
Yeah.
just have to say, I'm so terribly sorry for what's happening in Israel. I know that we have some history, and I just, for myself and hopefully on behalf of all my colleagues, just say our heart goes out to you and your communities and everything that's going on.
Well, thank you. I really
No,
appreciate
that was
you.
out of context, but I just wanted to make sure you knew.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Senator, appreciate it. Representative Garner has some follow-up questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate you taking the time, and if I jumped in the question, thanks for explaining it anyway. The main thing that looking at the card, was that we're offering transportation choices for all. That's what really stuck out to me, and right now, this seems to be pushing us. The big spend is on roads, which is a lot of our state has a lot of roads. But if we're going to have those choices available, then we're going to have to expand those donuts in years to come. In my mind, that the active transportation, the transit, are going to have to get a lot bigger if we're going to meet those choices for everyone. That's my feeling. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, did you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Michelle Carroll, Executive Director of MAG. I have the pleasure of wrapping up this presentation with the human component of the Unified Transportation Plan. This plan was built on a shared vision that defines how transportation can support key quality of life for our residents in the state of Utah by 4 main areas: better mobility, good health, connected communities, and a strong economy. As you continue to look through the trifold and on our website at unifiedplan.org, in addition to the maps and all the wealth of information that is on there, there are also human stories about the end users of the work, of the types of projects that we are implementing in this plan, and I hope you'll take a few minutes to read some of those testimonials from the residents of Utah. Access to efficient transportation is an obvious concern for all Utahns. Better mobility directly correlates to the quality of life and can be accomplished when vehicle travel hours are reduced, use of single occupant vehicles is decreased, and transportation system reliability is improved. Under this plan, Utah residents will see 5.8 fewer trips per household per year, and that will be accomplished by a multimodal transportation focus that this. Fewer days, what did I say, trips?
Fewer trips.
I'm sorry, 5.8 fewer days driving per year per household. Thank you. And active transportation, such as walking and biking, not only do they have the opportunity to provide an active lifestyle and health benefits, they also provide options for those that don't have access to vehicles or those that don't drive. And leaders and residents in the state of Utah have come to embrace the fact that active transportation is transportation. And through this plan, we look forward to an addition of 4,700 additional miles of active transportation through initiatives, and that's through 2050. By 2050, 4,700 additional active transportation miles through the Utah Trail Network. And I must say that the active transportation network in the state of Utah now and in the future is really the jewel in the crown of a multimodal transportation system in our state. Another focus of the plan is good health, which encompasses the well-being and safety of individuals and communities. Our transportation partners worked very closely with the Utah Department of Health and Human Services to address overall community health. The Unified Plan partners support a zero fatalities initiative because we understand that if our transportation facilities and options are not safe, then our communities and our individuals are at risk. Air quality is also a very important aspect of this health and safety-based approach. Significant improvements in emission standards and technology have been seen in the last 4 years. And with these emission decreases now factored into the baseline calculations, we expect a statewide decrease in emissions of 13% and a 28% reduction along the Wasatch Front through the implementation of this plan. As this plan works to build more mobile and healthy communities, it also works to build better connected communities. The placements of housing, job sites, recreational options, and education facilities make a really big difference on the types of trips that people make. The planning process that drove this plan factored in the relationships between transportation, land use, economic development, and these are very important and create a synergy of the placement of housing, jobs, transportation facilities when they're more thoughtfully placed together, often in city and town centers, in order to improve access, reduce time both spent in transport and the cost of getting from A to B. With the improvements of mobility, health, safety, and community connectedness, this will inevitably lead to a stronger economy in the state. Transportation plays a vital role of business and commerce, helping to maintain and build a strong economy. In the plan, there was an economic analysis commissioned by the partners, and that found that each dollar invested in transportation improvements outlined in the unified plan will increase 2.5 times through the economic growth and jobs added in the state. Implementation of this plan will also result in over $247 billion in total GDP increases in Utah's economy by 2050, and we can also expect over 270,000 jobs added as a result of this plan. In conclusion, the state of Utah finds itself at a transportation opportunity crossroads. Through understanding the opportunities and the challenges that we face in the state of Utah, we can start planning now and create policies that will ensure the growth, well-being, and prosperity of the residents and the economy. The partners and all of us would really like to thank and express our appreciation to the legislature for the guidance in providing the policies and multimodal investment to implement Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. With that, we encourage you to continue to look through the trifold, to visit the website, unifiedplan.org, and we would be happy to open it up to additional questions.
Okay, thank you. We do have one from Senator Kwan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering what your thoughts are and your plan is for language access, languages other than English.
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a great question, particularly, Senator, as Utah becomes increasingly diverse. And I would say in the planning process, we do targeted outreach to all communities across the state, which involves translation of all of our materials, specific outreach to particular organizations that are representing different ethnic groups in the state. I think critically, of course, also as people's access and interaction with the transportation system, that falls more in the UDOT and UTA camp, and they're making information available through their various programs to make sure that all of our residents are able to engage with and safely and effectively use the transportation system. And if we are all always open to ways to improve and do better. So if you or any others have ways to make sure that we can make the system accessible to all of Utah's residents, we'd love to hear it.
Great, thank you. I'd love to see some translation of your website, if that's something that could be done.
Yes, if that's not there already, I'm sure it's underway. This is the first time we're rolling the website out, and that's going to happen very soon if it's not there already, Senator. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does that end your presentation?
It does.
Well, thank you very much. You know, this is a big job to put together a plan like this, and a lot of people are involved. It's a great way to look ahead and see what's coming up, and collaborate with the cities, the counties, the state, and federal government as we look forward to future planning. So this is something that's not done in every state. And some states I've talked to, they say, how does Utah do that? I mean, our MPOs don't talk to UDOT or to the DOTs. I mean, sometimes they just don't get along, and sometimes they just build their kingdoms. But what I appreciate about this effort is everybody says, here's a goal, let's get together and figure it out, and we'll make adjustments as we go. I imagine one day we'll have to put aerial transportation in this plan, something like that, but there's always changes, but I appreciate the work that's been done, so thanks for your presentations today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Representative. And on behalf of all of us, thank you for the partnership with the legislature. And we'd all be happy to dig in more detail with any of the members of the committee or the legislature if you'd like. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks. Okay, let's go to, I think we're ready for this, item number 4, draft legislation on utility relocation costs, sharing amendment. And we're going to have Leif Elder from UDOT come up and discuss that. I think there may be, are they all out in the hallway? Okay, you know what? If they're not ready, we can skip down. Leif, are you ready or do you need more time? Okay, we'll go to the next item. Let's, pardon me? No. We're going to go to number 6, Law and Traffic Enforcement Report. So Lisa, do you want to come up, and Colonel Rapich?
Good afternoon again. Colonel Mike Rapish, Utah Highway Patrol.
Lisa Wilson, UDOT Deputy Director for Engineering and Operations.
And could you share the presentation? Thank you. Hopefully we've got a really efficient and quick update report on SB 23. Start up with the report on SB 23, and we'll start off with UDOT, kind of talking about what we're going to be looking at, and we'll follow back up with the coordination we've done on that.
Okay.
Okay.
It's coming.
Well, while she's pulling that up, Senate Bill 23 required UDOT and Public Safety to coordinate on changes to the state highway system. And so what we've done is we've really focused in on either new facilities or roadways that are changing character, maybe from a street with intersections to a more freeway-like interchange. So this first slide here represents the areas that we spent most of our meetings discussing and focusing on. You'll notice we have a couple in Davis County, West Davis Highway and US 89. We have the Mountain View corridor in both Salt Lake and Utah counties. And then in Washington County, we have SR7 or the Southern Parkway. So a couple of details about each one. West Davis Highway is 16 miles of new freeway west of I-15 in Davis County. It'll have 2 lanes in each direction with 6 new interchanges with lanes open late this year or early 2024. Next one. US 89, Farmington to I-84. This is a project that's already complete. It converted a roadway that was 2 lanes each direction with several signalized intersections into 9 miles of freeway, 3 lanes each direction. It included 4 new interchanges, 2 new grade-separated crossings, and we also added some new frontage road connectivity in the area. Next. The first Mountain View.
That, by the way, that really turned out well. I just drove that
Thank
a couple weeks ago and was way impressed.
This Mountain View corridor project here in Salt Lake County, it's Porter Rockwell Boulevard to Old Bingham Highway. I apologize, there is a mistake on this slide. It should be 9 miles of new freeway instead of 12. What we have today is 2 lanes each direction, but what people are driving on today is the future frontage roads of this system. This project will build 2 lanes each direction of freeway with 13 new interchanges. There's the planned construction completion date for this project is 2028. This Mountain View corridor project in Utah County, it's 2100 north to Porter Rockwell Boulevard. It's 4 miles of new roadway, 2 lanes in each direction with interchange improvements at 2100 north. I should also note that not included in this slide, a project that will follow up upon completion of this project is the conversion of 2100 North into a freeway. So that one will start probably in 2026. And our last route of focus is SR7 down in Washington County. This is an existing roadway, is 26 miles long. It has 12 existing interchanges with 5 planned interchanges. And what we have today is largely one lane in each direction on what we call a single barrel, which is one side of the divided freeway. The next phase of that would be to build that second barrel. Those projects aren't currently funded, but there are projects to do that second barrel in both phase 1 and phase 2 of the long-range plan.
And so kind of the background on how we got here, in 2021, the Utah Highway Patrol, we started actively engaging with our local agency partners in Salt Lake County on discussions specific to the 2 major corridors in Salt Lake County that the Utah Highway Patrol doesn't currently cover, and that's Bangerter Highway and Mountain View Corridor. Bangerter Highway becoming a newly designed limited access freeway style system, and then the inclusion of Mountain View Corridor on the far west side as a high-flow freeway system. It's very much going to connect into the inland port area for a primary northwest or north-south inlet and outlet for the inland port, as well as accessing the communities and the inter-county traffic as well. We brought that discussion to this committee in 2022, seeking some direction, some input, and some awareness on that. That turned into a 2023 legislative budget request coming from the governor's office to support funding for the Highway Patrol to take over operations on Bangerter Highway. That was appropriated and funded for FY24, and so that funding's in place. We have an anticipation of a go-live date of actually taking that corridor over in FY25. There, we received an appropriation of $3.5 million, a little bit more than that, as far as FY24 ongoing appropriation. There were one-time costs that were associated with that as well. In communicating with the Appropriations Committee, we were confident that with that ongoing money in the first year, as we're hiring new troopers, training them, getting them ready to go out onto the roadway, we could use the ongoing money one time in the first year to cover most of the one-time costs that would be associated with expanding that. Those costs included putting in a west side office for the Highway Patrol, which we are currently taking the old West Valley driver's license building. They've moved to the new TSOB. We've taken that building and we're remodeling that building and currently finishing the contract for that remodel that we hope will be done in the spring. Will be the west side office to support not only Bangerter Highway, but the potential for Mountain View Corridor in the future. We're currently hiring new troopers to be able to do that as well. And we've been actively purchasing the equipment that we're going to need to have for those troopers to be able to go out on the road. New vehicles, computers, everything that it takes to actually equip a trooper to go out there. That's in process right now, and again, with the expectation we'll have things in place and be able to take that on during FY25. So that's how the money's being spent this year, turning into ongoing expenses for the coming FY25 year. In addition to being able to receive that funding request, SB 23 was also passed, which did some things specifically looking at things like this as we're getting roadways expanding, new roadways coming into place, new roadways affecting existing roadways. How do we plan for that in the future and be aggressive and do the same thing, but looking at those as they come online? So we have, in addition to doing that, we've also, as directed by SB 23, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Public Safety, specifically the Highway Patrol, we have met 4 times, first in June, again in August, again in September, and again most recently last week, to discuss these projects, how they're progressing, and evaluate and get the information to be able to evaluate what would it take for a law enforcement response as these new roadways or expanding roadways come online. We're also working directly with our local partners that these roadways interact as well. We've had extensive conversations, as I described, with the local agencies here in Salt Lake County, with both of those corridors, and those discussions universally that see that the Utah Highway Patrol, in partnership with UDOT and the IMT units, are best equipped to take on those roadways in the most efficient, best use of resources. So that's taken place, and we're looking at all of the information that Ms. Wilson just covered. Going to the next slide. What we've identified is our upcoming priorities, in addition to moving operations onto Bangerter Highway, and we're actively engaged in being ready to do that with the funding we've received. We've identified and put these into priorities. So speaking specifically with Davis County, the 2 roadways in there, SR 89, that's been completion, and it's very much a high-flow, limited access freeway system. We have taken over operations on that, and we were able to use funding for positions that we freed up in other places to be able to put positions on there. Again, anticipating that West Davis Corridor is going to open at the end of this year, early next year. The Utah Highway Patrol will be the primary response agency for that corridor. That corridor, again, limited access, high freeway, high flow system that'll be an inter-county connection. It also has a unique challenge, and it goes on the far west side of Davis County, making it very, very difficult to access if you're on from I-15 or Legacy Highway, just because of the local communities in between and the way you'd have to do that. It's going to require people on that corridor pretty much all the time to be able to have an effective response. So we've identified, in addition to the resources we've already put on there, and we were able last year to free up 4 additional positions in addition to the 2 internally to support this effort. We're probably going to need another additional 7 FTEs that we're pushing forward and putting a budget request ready to move forward on that and present that to the governor's office. The next priority would be the Salt Lake County Mountain View corridor, which had already been identified, and we've actually presented the information on what it would take to take that over as well. That's identified there with the 14 FTEs. And then the third, Washington County with SR7, that has live traffic already. We're taking a portion of that right now, and some of the local agencies are covering a portion of that as that continues to become more of a main corridor and pick up more traffic, and those interchanges interchanges are completed. We anticipate that will be one that will fall under this evaluation as well. Working with the local agencies now to coordinate on that, and again, FTEs on that. Washington County is unique in the fact that Washington County has its own growth concerns unrelated to SR7 that we're looking at trying to be able to address. But in addition to that, to specifically address SR7, 2 troopers to be able to do that. And then even farther down the road, looking at the Utah County expansion of Mountain View Corridor, we're still kind of scoping that, trying to look at ways of how we can do a manpower analysis on that. We're early in that portion of that. We really haven't done a lot of coordination with local agencies, but we're making them aware of this process. And then finally, in addition to that, just for awareness, as we're doing that, simultaneously, the state is growing, and we're identifying existing areas that we need to put more resources to meet the demands, to meet increased traffic flows, increased population growth. That's kind of happening all over the state, but the single biggest lift on that is probably looking at the overall I-15 corridor and completing 24/7 coverage on the entire I-15 corridor. That's one of the manpower resource needs we're looking at while we're looking at these others as well. And with that, I think we've met what the SB 23 has asked us to do.
Thank you, appreciate that. So you're going to be seeking the 7 additional troopers needed for
West Davis.
Davis?
We have prepared a budget request for that and presented it, yes.
Okay. And Lisa, do you need additional IMTs for that road segment, or did we fund enough of those last year?
Yeah, we are not requesting new IMTs this year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, appreciate that report. I don't see any questions, so thank you very much. Okay, we'll go back on the agenda, go to item number 2, railroads. Kurt Gosser will do the introduction, and then we'll have Union Pacific and Lisa Wilson make a presentation. Peter, if you could go outside and let, oh, there they are, they're coming in. Okay, Kurt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kurt Gosser with the Office of Legislative Research, General Counsel. In the interest of time, I'm going to try to blaze through these slides as quickly as I can, just to give a summary of the bills, 4 bills that passed during the last general session that affect railroads. I will mention that the first one, HB 232, is already in effect. That is different than the other 3 that we'll discuss. It took effect on May 3rd, 2023. This was a bill from Representative Cutler, and it established a new process for allocating costs related to highway railroad crossings, so that those are distributed between the railroad and the highway authority. It took out some provisions that were similar in the Public Utilities Code and moved those into the Transportation Code to establish the Department of Transportation as having oversight over those discussions, and then establish a process for how those costs will be determined, who will share those and in what proportion. But then it also maintained a provision or a responsibility, rather, of the Public Service Commission to have dispute resolution authority if something comes up that way. The next bill is HB 51 from Representative Snyder. This bill authorizes the state or political subdivisions of the state to assess a railroad for certain costs of public infrastructure improvements. It limits the uses of those funds to be directly related to those improvements. Also limits the amount, has to be directly proportional to the benefit provided to the railroad. The next one is HB 63 from Representative Schultz. This created the Office of Rail Safety within the Department of Transportation. This is something that's authorized in federal code. These responsibilities are currently handled by the federal government, but it allows a state to apply and gain certification to take over these responsibilities. It includes inspection, compliance, and enforcement duties for several different aspects of rail operations, including grade crossings, hazardous materials, motive power and equipment, operating practices, signal and train control, and as well as track inspections. The bill requires the Office of Rail Safety to employ these inspectors. They are certified and trained by the federal government, so they're in line with what the standards need to be done and the standards established by the federal government. The Office of Rail Safety is required to investigate the length of time that a train blocks a highway at a rail grade crossing, and also examine and inspect condition of railroad facilities. If a railroad is found to be non-compliant, it provides a process for that to be resolved. A notice is sent to the railroad from the Office of Rail Safety. They're given an opportunity to cure, and then if they fail to cure that, there's an administrative hearing that's set. If the problem persists after that hearing and the results of that hearing, the Office of Rail Safety can refer that to the Federal Railroad Administration or the Surface Transportation Board. They also have the ability to issue an order prohibiting that practice and then imposing civil penalties. This is all funded through fees that would be assessed from the railroads, and it's kind of complicated how that would roll out. It's based on for the different types of inspections, it's based on the anticipated workload in each of those areas. The Office of Rail Safety will kind of establish how those fees will be assessed, based on track mileage or how many hazardous materials inspections they will have to do, so that those costs to the railroad directly reflect the fees that are imposed upon them. They will then be put into the Office of Rail Safety account. That's an expendable special revenue fund that's restricted only for these types of uses and not for any other use. It's only for the inspections and the other duties of the Office of Rail Safety. It also grants rulemaking authority to the department related to establish those safety standards and how those inspections will be carried out. And finally, SB 51, livestock collision amendments from Senator Owens. This bill rearranges code in some regards. We took some very old code that had similar requirements and moved those around a little bit, updated those. Requires the railroad to erect and maintain fencing alongside railroad right-of-way in various places, including privately owned land and public land where there's livestock grazing occurring. It clarifies that the railroad is liable for damages to livestock that results from railroad operations. That was in current code already, but we've clarified it, made that more clear. Requires the railroad to report the strike of any livestock. Currently, railroads are required to report other incidents, but not necessarily strikes of a livestock. And this also provides for a civil penalty for failure to report that strike. It provides a process for all of this to be administered through the Department of Agriculture and Food. A livestock owner can file a claim if the livestock is damaged. They file a claim with the department, then the department can then turn around and be reimbursed for those funds. There's an appeal process based on the value of the livestock. It requires an upfront deposit into the account by railroad operators based on the mileage of operation they have in the state of Utah. Once that fund is capitalized and a livestock owner makes a claim, Department of Agriculture can pay out that claim and then go back to the railroad that was liable and assess a fee to cover the cost that was paid out for the livestock damage. Let's see, I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, I should mention this at the beginning. We're a nonpartisan office. I'm not speaking in favor of any of the bills or anything like that. I'm trying to provide a summary and details about those bills. I'm open to any questions along that line.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So the purpose of this is there's been a lot of dialogue about UP and other railroads and the railroad safety and railroad crossing. We wanted to make sure that you understood all the bills from this past year, their previous bills before that, some dealing with switchers and other things like that. And what we want to have now, we've invited Union Pacific and UDOT to come in and talk about the response to the bills and their programs and philosophies going forward. So we'll have Adrian, if you want to speak first, and then we'll turn it over to Lisa Wilson from UDOT.
Thank you, Chairman. So just by way of introduction, my name is Adrian Guerrero. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Public Affairs for Union Pacific. I manage our public affairs team for our 10 western states, and I'm very proud of the work that I do with my colleague Nathan Anderson, based here in Salt Lake City. And this is my first opportunity to come to this body and provide an update. I've had a number of meetings with individual representatives and senators in this body over the last 6-9 months on what has really transpired in recent years, that has gotten Union Pacific and the state to this point. And I want to fully acknowledge just the longstanding history and partnership between the railroad and the state. And I want to work diligently and am committed to getting Union Pacific back in that good state with our state partners and local partners. And so with that, I just want to provide, again, a couple historical points about Union Pacific, which I'm sure a lot of folks will already know about UP in this great state, and then also provide some direct updates on each of those bills on where we've been working and obviously working with the sponsors in conjunction. We have sincerely recognized that Utah is the fastest growing state in the nation. And with that, we have fully recognized, working with our partners at UDOT and local communities that are handling all that growth, that we have to manage and resolve ways of coexisting with that exponential growth. We've been in Utah since 1868. We've been operating here proudly for 155 years. We employ 966 employees in Utah with an annual payroll of $102.1 million. Each one of those jobs also supports 8 jobs elsewhere within the economy. Effectively, our employees are generating over 7,700 jobs elsewhere. In 2022, UP transported 20.6 million tons of goods into and 25.3 million tons out of Utah. We've invested over $284 million in infrastructure and equipment in Utah last year alone. Utah is a key state for Union Pacific, and we want to be trusted partners as we continue to grow and change for the next 155 years. That is something that our former CEO, Lance Fritz, joined us in explaining and providing, delivering that message to a number of communities back in April post-session to, again, recommit Union Pacific to working with communities on a host of projects and some challenging projects that have come our way. So with that, I'll start with House Bill 51, Railroad Right-of-Way. Again, we want to thank the bill sponsors for giving us a chance to show them that we can work through the issues that led to the introduction of that legislation. We have a team of over 75 employees and contractors within our system, which includes real estate, which is land and utilities, engineering, which are our track, structure, and signal, and of course, our law department, who handle these issues nationwide. Of that 75, we have 7 people who are dedicated to Utah-specific project, whether at right-of-way crossings. We've identified where the hotspot projects are in Utah and have dedicated these teams to accelerate those projects. For example, one of the key projects was a crossing in Representative Snyder's district in Logan City. And with the partnership of the city, that crossing project is now complete and fully operational and safe for the motoring public and safe for railroad operations. We are also working on other hotspot locations in Vineyard and Springville and have meetings scheduled with those key stakeholders, including UDOT, UTA, and those respective cities, along with the UP teams to continue working through those projects. We've had standing meetings post-session this year, and we'll continue those meetings until we get those projects to successful resolution for all parties. As we work on those specific projects, I want to highlight that we have about 7 sticky, challenging projects out of 199 in the state of Utah. So what we don't hear are the 97% of the projects that are going through the process successfully with UP feedback in collaboration with public works departments, with city management, and with UDOT to bring those projects to resolution. And these other 7 projects, again, are unique, whether it's crossing realignment, a full rail realignment, hosting both a mix of freight and passenger services, but also, of course, working with the respective road authorities as we go through that. We hope that the increased attention put on these issues with the legislature will allow us to continue working to delay the implementation of that specific bill. And I want to reiterate or state, you're going to see a theme as I provide these updates on each of these bills, which is we have heard you and we are responding and we will continue doing so. House Bill 63, again, working with Leader Schultz, we want to thank the bill sponsors for giving us a chance to provide more data and information and explain the processes in place on the safety front for Union Pacific, both at the employee level as well as infrastructure and our equipment. We say this all the time and we mean it. Safety is our #1 priority. We would not be able to operate our business without safety at our core. Safety supersedes all other considerations as we run our operation. And again, you've heard these numbers, 99.99% of all of our hazardous material shipments by rail reach their destination without incident. From point A to point B, 0 incidents. We continue to see a significant decline in derailments and a significant improvement in safety across the system since 2012. We've seen that derailment decline rate of 55% over the past 10 years. We will continue working with our state partners and local partners to highlight the various safety investments we make within the infrastructure, whether that's our track, signal, or bridge systems. That also applies directly to hazmat. And I mention hazmat because I fully realize that there's been a lot of attention on railroad safety as a result of the incident earlier this year in Ohio. And Union Pacific, along with the entire industry, continues working with our federal partners and regulators at the FRA, the STB, and PHMSA as we work through proposed legislation at the federal level. I mentioned our employee safety. We have a system in place with our employees in order for them to provide direct anonymous feedback to Union Pacific management. Any employee can speak directly with a manager. We also have various hotline systems and online systems to allow for easy access and easy reporting on any level. When we think about our employees, I want to highlight that over 85% of our employees are unionized under 13 different rail unions. That covers everything from our locomotive engineers, our conductors, to brake trainmen and right-of-way inspectors. We are very proud of our workforce. We recognize that Union Pacific continuously gets highlighted as a great place to work, particularly as the #1 employer of veterans nationwide. And I want to stress, again, the investment in the training of our employees and the continued investment in our infrastructure to keep our operations safe for both our employees and the communities we operate in. Again, we have heard the concerns and we are responding. House Bill 232, railroad crossing maintenance. We support any effort to improve public safety, particularly at our railroad crossings, and we support the efforts of the bill to better allocate impact and costs across agencies and coordinate with the affected railroad operators. We always support more communication, collaboration, and partnership with the state, and we will continue those discussions with UDOT as we look to crossing maintenance on what a fair and equitable system can be for both parties. But again, with our partners at the federal level and the state level, we understand that while we want to continue identifying opportunities to coexist with the growth that we see, we also recognize that these crossings can be a significant liability and a concern for rail safety, for our employees and for the public motorists as well. So identifying what the appropriate measures are for crossing maintenance is going to be very key in how we do that together with UDOT and with the road authorities. Senate Bill 61, livestock. We want to thank Senator Owens, the Farm Bureau, UDAF, and a host of others who have continued working with us during the session, post-session, on identifying UP's responsibilities as it relates to livestock fencing. We fully recognize and are aware what that looks like. I know there's been some level of misinformation on what is the ownership, what is the maintenance responsibilities of the railroads. Where we have fencing and have maintained that, we will continue to do so. We have been working with UP's engineering team and highlighting, focusing on specific hotspots statewide where we have had fencing challenges and issues, and we are coordinating and identifying the right contractors to help us get out to those sites, repair existing locations that have been challenging, or identify locations that are in need of fencing, and we will continue working directly with the landowners on those locations. That work continues in progress. We are going to take a phased approach on addressing those locations, and we look forward to continue working with the stakeholders on those sites. We had a meeting back, I want to say in July, down in Nephi, and we brought our head of the UP Claims Division to speak with ranchers and to speak with state stakeholders on what UP's process is as it relates to property claim when there is a livestock collision. We learned a lot, and I think we shared a lot of information in that session, and we've identified ways to streamline that process and also working with the state, identify ways to address concerns of what I would call fair market value for the livestock when there is an incident. We also identified that the railroad already participates in notifications when there is a livestock collision. And so we feel that by continuing to work with these key stakeholders, we'll be able to help address these issues outside of legislation. But we want to continue to demonstrate that to the sponsors as well as our stakeholders. So we'll continue working with the Farm Bureau and UDAF to make sure existing UP resources for livestock collision and related fence repair are dispersed throughout the state, and the issue doesn't rise to the level of bringing it to the legislature once again. So again, we have heard and are working to respond. Those are the updates that I want to provide on each of the specific bills, but again, I want to reiterate, on the projects that have been more challenging than not, we continue working with the direct communities, and I invite those communities to reach out directly to Nathan Anderson and myself to help facilitate those discussions. A lot of times when we hear about these challenges, it feels like it's months after something has bubbled up. And if we have communities feeling comfortable and engaging that direct conversation, we can pursue those conversations internally with whatever subject matter team at UP, and we want to demonstrate that you're going to have a different and more direct and better experience as a result of that communication with us. So allow us to be the advocates within UP to advance those projects.
Thank you very much for that presentation and that commitment. It's always encouraging to
know we've got great partners, and that there's an ability to enhance that relationship. I have a couple lights. We'll go to Representative Johnson first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just want to speak to the fact that, you stated that you've been heard, and I live in Logan. And I just want to thank you for the work that was done there. The population is growing so fast. One of the issues for us is trying to get traffic off of Main Street and working with UDOT on that and building transportation more on the west side of our community. So the work that you did there on 6th West and 10th North and 1400 North are really remarkable. And I've watched that now for a year. And then I look at the building that's going on there in Logan on the west side, that arterial road that now crosses those railroad tracks. That's a big deal. And so I'm really thankful for that. Another project that you're working on and UDOT is working on in combination is Highway 30, and then how that's going to cross the railroad going west towards Tremont. And it's another one of those projects where, it's the combination of local people, UDOT in our state, and Union Pacific, as we also then try to create another way for folks to have a way out of the valley. So you either go on that road or you go up through Sardine Canyon. And, there isn't any other way to get all of those people to some other places. So I would just say to you that those decisions are very, very important to nearly 150,000 people that live in Cache Valley. So I know that you've been heard. Just wanted to thank you for that.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
that, Representative.
Senator Buxton.
I've been here a while, and been involved on 2 or 3 fundings of different projects that dealt with the railroad. One of them was 24th Street in Ogden. That's probably been 10 years now that we've been trying to get that interchange as a full interchange, and seems like that all of a sudden we have to redesign the whole thing because of the Union Pacific Railroad unwillingness to work. And I'm not pointing any fingers here. I'm just questioning why we can't work together a little quicker, a little faster. That's just one incident in Ogden. Another one was they put a fence in along a trail. It took a lot of time to get permission to get that. Another piece is the Union Station property. The city owns the station and the railroad owns the property, but they won't work. I don't know what the holdup there is. That's been probably 15 years trying to get that resolved. So can you help us in that area?
Yeah, let's follow up on that one offline. I've heard bits and pieces of some of the historical ones in Ogden. I used to head up our network planning team before I came back to the public affairs side of the house, but I'd be happy to connect with you and see if we can identify a better path and a quicker one on resolving some of those issues. I like to think I have a magic wand. I don't, but I am happy to connect, and I will get the right people to help us navigate that. So, and as it relates to the crossing project, if that's an interconnection issue, I know, again, some of them can be more complex than others, but we're happy to work with you and the road authority to figure out what that path looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know.
Representative Christofferson.
Appreciate you flying in and to address some of these issues, and appreciate the effort to take care of some of the concerns that we have. I know that in American Fork, you're helping with the crossing that the school district and the city were working on. Appreciate that. That's finishing up. I do have a concern that I need your help with in Vineyard City. They've been working on a project for several years, and it seems like they get to a point where they can go ahead, and then there's some backtracking that happens, and they feel like they're starting all over again. So we need some attention there where we can say, let's get to the bottom of this and make a plan that they can move forward on. Is that something you can help with?
Yeah, Vineyard. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Vineyard is one of those top hotspot projects. I was just speaking to a representative from Vineyard a little bit before we came into the committee. And that one is of high on the radar on working with our engineering team, our network planning team, our service unit. And while I recognize it as one project, it's almost a full package of projects, right? And we know that there's certain demands that the city is trying to address, and then also from our side, not just an operating access issue, but of course from a safety standpoint and what the associated infrastructure is. So you have my commitment to continue working directly with the city of Vineyard on that.
Yeah, it's a little tough situation because they're growing so fast and they're bound by the tracks there. So anyway, whatever you can help me with.
UDOT's going
I'd
to help
like-
us. I'm not signing lease up for anything, but I know UDOT has been very accessible and understanding of how we're working through that. So a couple different players in that specific project, but we are coordinated and we'll continue moving forward.
And if I can help, I'd be glad to be involved, so.
Thank you.
thanks.
Representative Ivory, do you still have a question or comment?
I was just going to ask how he can do this job without a big, rich beard, you know? We miss that beard, you know, it has a life of its own. But,
And I can't beat Nathan's. I can certainly try, but you guys will have to take a look at me in 2 years from now, and my kids won't recognize me. But the beard, you know, joking aside, it shows the historical significance of the railroad and our, you know, homage to the founding fathers and what got us at this point. So if I could do that, I would pull it off. I'll work on it. But
we do appreciate you being here and the attention. It's been a really trying issue for a lot of people, a lot of communities, and you know the fact that you're putting attention into it and working to build a partnership on those things is noted and very much appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Lisa, let's go to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm Lisa Wilson, the UDOT Deputy Director for Engineering and Operations. I have a couple slides if we can switch over to that, but. As Adrian mentioned, you know, 3 of these bills that we're talking about today had some delayed implementation till next year. So a lot of our efforts have really been in preparation for those effective dates. We've been doing a lot of research and coordination, and I would also like to say that we have been having a lot of meetings and discussions with our UP partners. They've been very productive, both on all of these issues and specific projects, as Adrian mentioned. So just to quickly go through the bills and where we're at, HB 51, the railroad right-of-way amendments. This bill did give a government entity authority to assess a railroad, but it also requires the Department of Transportation to determine assessment amounts if 2 or more entities are involved. So what we're working on right now is figuring out what those benefits are, determining how we would define what those assessments would be, and preparing for developing our procedures and rulemaking. With Senate Bill 61, the livestock collision amendments, most of the responsibility related to this one, as Kurt mentioned, is with the Department of Agriculture and Food. However, there is a requirement for UDOT to coordinate with them when there is a livestock hit. And so we are coordinating with the Department of Agriculture and Food to define what that coordination looks like going forward and how that'll function once the bill becomes effective. And we are again meeting with them in early November. HB 63, Office of Rail Safety. As has also been mentioned, this one has the delayed implementation. We've been working closely with the Federal Railroad Administration, coordinating what happens on effective date. We have an agreement that they have to participate in this program that we can be ready to sign as soon as this becomes effective. We've been discussing options with them for hiring the employees, how to get them trained more quickly, things like that. And we've been working on getting ready to prepare the grant application, which we would have to do to qualify for the training funds with FRA for our inspectors, along with researching what fees and penalties, how we would build this program and write the rule for this as well. On HB 232, this was a cleanup bill from HB 181 the previous year, which really gave the department the authority to determine how maintenance fees are allocated among some other rail safety requirements. We are still coordinating this with UP. We continue to work on it to, as Adrian mentioned, and so we'll continue down that path to try and get to a resolution that we can all agree on. So that is my update on where UDOT is with these bills.
Thank you very much for that presentation and the update. Questions from the committee? I do not see any. That's all we have signed up for this item. We thank you for coming and the work. There will be continuing discussions as we go through, updated and working with a couple items that have been highlighted here. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you all.
Okay, we're going to go down to item number 7, University of Utah Internal Information Security Audit. We will have Nicola Camp. There you are, over there. Okay. And again, this is a required report based on the information system and some other issues that have happened in the past, and the good work that's been upcoming and happening in order to resolve some issues. Okay, if you'll identify yourselves and proceed. Press your button. It may have been turned off.
Yeah, okay, got it now.
Yeah.
I am Nicola Camp.
There you go.
I am the director of the Utah Population Database, UPDB, and I have with me our senior security analyst, Jared DeWitt. The purpose of today's report out to you is the results of our internal security audit that we have performed. We are required to do that biennially, and this year, 2023, is the first of those report outs to this committee. Okay, so I just have a short background. The Utah Population Database, the UPDB, is a data resource. We're part of the University of Utah and housed at the university's Huntsman Cancer Institute. So we support biomedical and health-related research projects, and those are to understand disease and improve health. And as a Utah-focused data resource, the discoveries are relevant to Utahns and to Utah families. The UPDB makes possible a variety of different epidemiologic investigations that include everything from understanding and describing patterns of disease in the population and in families, to risk factors, to identifying risk factors of those for those diseases, and even discovering strategies to be able to prevent or control those diseases. And for some of those things, we're actually world-renowned. There really is no better place than Utah to understand how diseases may run in families. My personal story is that that's why I came to the University of Utah 25 years ago. And of course, ultimately, many of the studies where we want to get to is towards prevention, and we are very proud at UPDB to have been part of projects that have developed screening guidelines and also discovered genes that have actually been translated and are used in clinical care. And those have had both local, national, and international impact. So I'm going to talk about our security framework. The UPDB, we're using the NIST Special Publication 800-171 Revision 2 as our framework for our data security.
So NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And 800-171 was specifically created to safeguard non-classified sensitive data. And it's become widely used and thought acknowledged as a standard. So what is that? The framework is a checklist of 110 items. So what UPDB keeps is a system security plan where we develop a protection against each one of those 110 different items. Okay, so we undertook a thorough internal security audit this year that was performed over June to August of the year, and that has two parts. So the first part is the system security plan. So as I said, that's 110 different items. So each one of those is reviewed and tested, so not just hypothetically what it looks like, but testing also of whether it is fully implemented and fully functional as it was designed. For any that we feel that needed additional steps to bring to fully implemented, we lay out a plan of action that has solutions and resources that are needed to do that. And there is a risk level attached to each one of those issues. The risk assessment that we used was also based on national standards, the NIST SP 830 guidelines. And the risk levels include an assessment of the likelihood that the issue would lead to
Yes, so we'd be looking at, whether it might lead to a risk to either confidentiality or integrity or availability of our data, or more specifically, the DLD data. So that's how we went about the risk assessment.
Thanks, Jared. So there are 4 risk levels. They are critical, high, moderate, and low. And as they sound, they start from critical, meaning something that is exposed vulnerability of high impact that needs immediate attention, down to low risk ones, which may even be implemented but could be more effective. And you'll notice that I use the phrase to bring back to full implementation. And I use that purposefully because I think we can all appreciate that security threats and cyber threats are ongoing and changing every day. So as they change and evolve, and we get security advisories every week, we have to evolve our protections as well. So at any point, there may be elements that need some improvement, and this is actually why we have a full-time security analyst on staff at UPDB. Okay, so these are the summary of our findings. So of the 110 items on the 800-171 framework, we found that 91 of the protections were fully implemented and fully functional as designed. We found that 19 protections needed additional steps to get to that level of full implementation. 0 of those were critical risk, 0 were high risk, 3 were moderate risk, and 16 were low risk. And we have a plan of action to address each of these. And in fact, since we finished the audit, 1 of those moderate risk and 1 of the low risk have been resolved already. The 2 remaining moderate risks have started to be addressed and are on track to be completed by the end of November. And then the remaining low risk ones, all of those will be resolved in subsequent months. So I'll end with restating that we have the University of Utah and the UPDB have a commitment to the security of the data that we steward. We take data safety extremely seriously. We commit to completing the plan of action that from the audit but also to commit to maintaining our cybersecurity maturity, because the NIST SP 800-171 itself brings out new revisions. So as those are published and as those are ready, we will adopt those. And we commit to conduct ongoing assessments. That's really what Jared's job is, to be diligent in identifying emerging security risks and having effective implementation of those. And of course, to come back every 2 years and to give this report to this committee. And these are the key participants who were part of the audit. And I will finish there. Thank you for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Appreciate you bringing this report up on what you're doing. There's a couple other things that cause this, the accessing of state information So Senator Andrig has a question.
Well, maybe a series of questions. I know that I've looked into your organization, what you do. What prompted the creation of the population database in the first instance? My understanding is it happened way back in the 1970s, but what was it that put it into place? What was the enacting language? Did the legislature do this, or was it an executive order from the governor?
It's the latter.
The executive order from the governor. So as such, what is the authorizing language that continues this proliferation of the expansion of the database? Is it additional policies that have been put in place in the legislature, or is this being primarily driven from the executive branch?
I thank you very much for your question. I was hoping to be able to get feedback on the security report, because we really want to know how we can improve that and keep that going. I would love to get back to you on that, but I'm not prepared to answer at this point.
You know, I'm kind of setting you up a little bit. Right? The reason I bring this up is that there are a lot of things functionality-wise that you do, and there's a lot of data that is shared with proper protocols and securities within state agencies. And I think people would be mildly to extremely alarmed if they were able to get in and actually see what data is available on them and their historical going back and their families and deceased people and everything like that. And there's a tremendous amount of value to this. And I appreciate the audit. The audit, I think, was done because we started having questions. I'm looking at Senator Harper because he and I have been banging this drum actually on and off for the last several years. But I still come back to what is the authorizing language that put this all in place to begin with. I guess here's the more important question I would ask. Is this too big of a risk without legislative input? You're asking for us to kind of look at the audit and give you a rubber stamp, which is kind of like, good, keep going. But I'm asking the questions of where you originated, and is it appropriate for us to actually come in and maybe either officially put it into statutory authorized language or dismantle you, which would tick a lot of people off. I know it would, okay? And yet, we represent the citizens. And I don't think you guys have done a bad job in protecting the data, but I think people would be alarmed to understand what was in this. Or just the thought of Big Brother had this information, was using it in this manner. I'm hesitant to jump into your audit and say, hey, good job, even though I look at it and say, hey, this is actually probably really well done, when the fundamental thing is, should we even be doing this in the first place? So that's where I'm coming from, is when you look at this audit, and I would appreciate you if you send the audit out to everybody, if that, I know it's part of the materials. If you want to jump down this rabbit hole, you probably should. I'm looking at my colleagues here because there's a lot of information in here, and I'm not trying to like bash you guys over the head, but I am trying to say that this was originally done through executive order and expanded under Bangerter. A lot of information has been shared even up to the Huntsman Cancer Institute, which is a non-publicly controlled entity. I'm just saying, if people knew what was being shared and how it was being shared, I think there would be a great concern. So I'm hesitant to just say good job on the audit, even though it's probably a good audit, because that means that I'm de facto saying, hey, I agree with everything you guys are and do. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap this up. I appreciate this. I think to summarize here, yes, the audit and the security that you're doing is very, very good. And I appreciate the fact that you've done some additional information on the website for people to go through and say, you cannot use my information. I think you're accumulating information from a lot of sources, which would go through and give great pause to a number of the people in Utah who have no idea the information that you have on them, their genetic, their health, and all those other type of things. So there will probably be further discussion on this, but I do want to thank you very much for bringing this in and what you've done on one part, but the other issue that Senator Anderegg has brought up has yet to be resolved. So thank you very much. Committee, we're going to wrap this up. I just want to express our thanks to Senator Anderegg for his service. He will be, there will be an election tonight to find his replacement in the Senate, but thank you very much. You've done a great job, and our best to you. Representative Christofferson?
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in. Senator Andre came in with me as freshman representatives 11 years ago, and appreciate his work over the years. We've got a good friendship, and he's been involved and taken a lot of time. And I'm retired, but a lot of you still have jobs during the day, and I really just like to recognize you for all your work and sacrifice. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We will not be hearing item number 4, obviously, because a number of us have to be on the floor right now for advice and consent. Senator Buxton for a final motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.